The old house was a gift from a distant, forgotten aunt. A sprawling Victorian relic, tucked away in the countryside, miles from the nearest town. It was meant to be our sanctuary, a fresh start for me and Lara. When we first arrived, sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, dancing on dust motes like tiny captured fairies. The air smelled of old wood, dried roses, and the promise of quiet days. We spent the first week exploring. The house was a labyrinth of rooms, each with its own character. A library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a sunroom filled with withered potted plants, and a nursery on the top floor, untouched for decades. A single rocking horse, standing silent in the center. Can you believe this place is ours? Ilara's voice, always a soft melody, echoed in the grand foyer. I smiled, my hand finding hers. It's perfect, I said, and for a moment, it truly was. But as the days bled into nights, the house began to show a different face. It started with the sounds. A soft thump from the attic, a floorboard creaking upstairs when we were both in the kitchen. I dismissed it as the house settling, old bones groaning. Ilara would laugh it off. It's just the wind, silly. This old place has a lot to say. Then came the shadows, fleeting shapes in the corner of my eye. A darkness that seemed to deepen in the long hallways, even in the middle of the day. One evening I was making tea, and I saw a reflection in the kettle's polished surface. A tall, slender figure stood in the doorway behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering, but the doorway was empty. Ilara was reading in the living room, bathed in the warm glow of the lamp. She hadn't moved. The small, unexplained events grew more frequent. A book I'd left on the table would be back on the shelf. The rocking horse in the nursery would be turned to face the door, its painted eyes seeming to follow me. I tried to talk to Ilara about it, but she'd look at me with concern, her brow furrowed. "You're just tired," she'd say, her hand cool on my forehead. "Maybe you're not sleeping well." She was right. Sleep had become a stranger. I'd lie awake for hours, listening to the house's symphony of whispers and creaks. The air grew heavy, oppressive. I started feeling watched, a constant, prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I began to talk to myself, muttering reassurances under my breath as I moved from room to room. One afternoon I found a loose floorboard in the master bedroom. Curiosity overriding my unease, I pried it open. Beneath it was a small, velvet-lined box. Inside, a collection of old, sepia-toned photographs and a yellowed diary. The photos showed a family, a man, a woman, and a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7. They looked happy, posing on the front porch of this very house. I opened the diary. The handwriting was elegant, feminine. It belonged to the woman in the photos, a woman named Agnes. The early entries were filled with joy, descriptions of her life with her husband Robert and their daughter, Lily. But as I read on, the tone shifted. Agnes wrote about her husband's growing obsession with the house's history. He'd discovered it was built on the site of an old asylum, one that had burned to the ground a century ago. He started hearing things, seeing things. He became distant, paranoid. He claimed the house was talking to him, telling him secrets. Then the entries turned frantic. Agnes wrote that Robert had locked her in the bedroom. He believed she was an imposter, a spirit from the asylum trying to trick him. He claimed their real daughter had been taken, replaced by something else. The last entry was just a few words, scrawled and desperate. "He won't let me out. He says Lily isn't real. He says I'm all alone." A cold dread washed over me. I slammed the diary shut. "Ilara," I called out, my voice trembling. "Elara, we need to leave." Silence. The house was utterly, profoundly silent. "Elara?" I called again, my voice weaker this time. I walked through the empty rooms. The living room, the kitchen, the sunroom. Her book was gone from the table. Her coat was missing from the rack. It was as if she'd never been there at all. Panic seized me. I ran upstairs, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. I burst into our bedroom, empty. The nursery. The rocking horse was still, its gaze fixed on the empty doorway. That's when I saw it. On the wall, next to the small window, were faint pencil markings, a child's height chart. The dates were old, faded, and next to the highest mark, a single name was written in a careful, childish script. Lily. My blood ran cold. The asylum, the fire, the husband who believed his wife was an imposter, the wife who believed she had a daughter who wasn't real. History wasn't just repeating itself. It was a closed loop, and I was trapped inside it. I stumbled back into the hallway and caught my reflection in the dusty, full-length mirror at the end of it. My face was pale, my eyes wide with terror. But it wasn't my reflection that made me scream. It was the other person standing beside me in the mirror. The tall, slender figure with hollow eyes and a smile that wasn't a smile at all. A figure that had been with me this whole time. A silent companion only I could see. I looked from the mirror back to the empty hall, then back to the mirror. The figure was still there, its shadowy hand reaching for mine. A voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement whispered from the glass, "You're just tired. Maybe you're not sleeping well." The old house was a gift. It was meant to be our sanctuary, a fresh start. But there is no hour. There is only me. I've been alone the entire time. I ran, down the stairs, through the foyer, fumbling with the heavy bolt on the front door. The cool night air hit my face, and I didn't stop running until the house was just a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. I found my way to the nearest town and went straight to the local library, to the historical archives. I had to know. I found the town records, the old newspapers, an article from 50 years ago. Tragedy at Blackwood Manor. A family found after weeks. The husband, Robert, had taken his own life. His wife, Agnes, was found in the locked master bedroom, having starved. The police report mentioned her diary. In it, she wrote of a daughter named Lily. But the part that made my world crumble, the part that I read over and over again until the words blurred into meaningless symbols, was the final sentence of the official report. It stated, with cold, bureaucratic certainty, that Robert and Agnes never had any children. I dropped the file, my hands shaking uncontrollably. If Agnes never had a daughter, who was Lily? Who was the girl in the photographs? Who was the child who marked her height on the nursery wall? And then, a more terrifying question began to claw its way into my mind. A question that has haunted every second of my life since I left that house. A question that makes me check my own reflection, searching for the shadow in the corner of my eye. If Elara was never real, am I?